good. How are you doing today, Karyn?
Very well, thanks.
So, how about we just go ahead and get straight down to it? This is Dave
That
with
sounds good.
this is Dave with Extreme Metal, XMD Northwest. I'm here with Karyn Crisis, doing her solo project, Gospels of the Witches. Salem's Wound is the name of the album. How are you doing today, Karyn?
Doing very well. Recently got back from a visit to Brooklyn, rehearsing with the rest of the band for our live shows in March, so I'm feeling awesome.
So how did you come up with the name for the group for your new solo project?
Well, that's a long story. Basically, when I got together with some other people to make this album, it was supposed to happen 5 years ago. Some fortuitous events changed the course of everything. I met Davide Tiso, who was at the time living in Italy, where he's from, through the internet, through another friend, and we were supposed to start working on my solo album back then through Skype, and then the plan was I would go stay in Tuscany for a few months and record the album there and flesh the rest of the details out. But I arrived in Tuscany after a period of several months of getting to know Davide and the third person we were working with. And I arrived at this little house in the middle of olive fields in Tuscany, Italy, and it was haunted by an ancient witch spirit who was very benevolent, and she began teaching me about the true history of witches, what that meant, and all of the old ways through what we would call mediumship. So I could see her sometimes in the room, and I would hear a lot of information from her voice, and I would receive a lot of the images and information in different ways. And so this changed my life because I didn't really know anything about witchcraft and what part I would play in that, understanding my own place there. So the album did not happen at that time, and for the next 4.5 years or so, Davide and I eventually, after staying in Tuscany for a while, moved back to the U.S. and began writing and continuing to learn from this witch spirit who was teaching me the true history of witchcraft in Italy and everything that really went down in Europe versus like a lot of the myths and the smear campaign that the church put into action. So during this period of learning about this actual genocide that happened in history, I was also learning about all these ancient practices and what they were used for. And this began to change the direction of my painting, and it began to change the direction of my focus of singing. So it took a few years of us sounds and different directions musically for me to kind of find my voice. How I wanted to express my voice newly, which would be quite different from the past. And along that way, as I was learning about this period in history, I found a book called Gospel of the Witches, written by Charles Leland. And it's a book that's supposed to be about this witch spirit that I met, whose name is Aradia. But a lot of the things written in the book are folk tales that still carry that smear campaign from the church about witches being evil and focusing on lowly things. And so this witch spirit was telling me that a lot of these things in this book about her are wrong, but at least it exists, so she hasn't been forgotten. I decided then that I wanted to name my band after everything she's taught me and what she's teaching me about the true history of witches in the world. So I decided to call it Karyn Crisis' Gospel of the Witches, in homage to that experience.
So how'd you come up with the name Salem's Wound then?
Well, originally when I started, questioning the history of what happened to witches, my mind immediately went to, of course, the East Coast in Salem, Massachusetts. And I thought perhaps that's where I would learn maybe some of my own history there, or just the history of the country in terms of witches. But so that was one of the first tracks that I ended up writing. But soon after that, Aradia began teaching me about the Italian history and what happened there with the Celts and the Scandinavians in southern Italy. So my focus moved to something even more international. But that's where I started, being someone someone who, grew up in America, that's where my mind led me to explore. It just would so happen that my education would go further than that. So I decided that being that this album was devoted to witches, that was such a scar on the history, that's a mark, a resonance left in time, the burning of witches in Salem, that I wanted to sort of take back that event and empower it with some information about the truth of what happened.
So is that why you're releasing the first track is being released as Mother, is to inform people about the history and where it began?
That's a good way to say it. That song was, it's definitely from a personal perspective of that I saw when I was connecting to the concept of this album and emotionally feeling it open itself to me. I started getting a vision of someone back in ancient times feeling her own teacher being burned at the stake, and that feeling of devastation and powerlessness, and at the same time understanding the sacrifice that those women went through to try to teach us all about who we are beyond the physical world. So those are the kind of things that were put into that song, and it seems to be for people who like that song, there seems to be a very important emotional resonance there, and in a way it encapsulates the whole concept of the album. So we all felt like, for a couple of reasons, creatively and educationally and emotionally, it was a great first track to start with.
So how'd you come together with this lineup for this band and for the record?
That's also a really, really lovely story. Davide and I were, of course, writing the album together, just the two of us, and he's a very prolific songwriter. So he would write all these songs with layers and layers of guitars. And although he's also really good at programming drums, most of these songs he presented to me didn't have drums. And this was a change for me as a singer. In the past, I always waited till the band was completed writing a song, and I would largely respond to the drums as a way to base my own percussive rhythms against. And I would just kind of listen to the guitars for atmosphere. But this time around, all I had were the guitars. And the atmosphere was so strong, I responded with a lot more of a feminine style of vocal singing, you could say, but I still wanted to add the heaviness and the darkness there. And so my intention was, with the choruses and in certain parts of the song, to add really, really thick layered vocals that almost acted as percussion themselves in lieu of the drums. So in a way, vocally, I was setting the time and the pace for these songs from the start. And at a certain point, I realized that I also wanted to not only have myself doing the melodic vocals and the heavy vocals, but I wanted to almost give an effect of a choir backing me up. And around this time, as I was actually writing the track Mother, Davide played me an Immolation video. And I've been familiar with Immolation from the early 90s when Crisis was out and about, because we were from the same, neighborhood at that time. But he had played me this new song, A Glorious Epoch, and I loved this track, and I just thought, while listening to Ross's voice, that he needed to be another voice on this album. I just felt it really strongly. And so I sent him an email, and I told him I had a couple of demo tracks that I could send him, and he was really interested. He liked the concept, and he liked the dark, atmospheric, creepy vibe of the songs. Just so happened that Immolation was coming through town a couple days later with Cannibal Corpse. So Davide and I went out to reconnect with Bob and Ross, and Ross was in. And then I also felt like I needed one more male voice on a couple of songs, and I thought, well, I kind of kept hearing Mike Hill from Toombs' voice, having a sort of higher range pitch. So I asked him, and he was also interested in it. And he helped us get the drummer Charlie Schmidt on the record. So that's where it stood for the recording. But once the recording was underway, I asked Ross if he would be part of the live band. And he accepted. And then to flesh out, I asked his partner in Immolation, Bob Vigna, if he would also play guitars. And he also accepted. And so that's how the band was born. It started as, the creative recording process and grew from there. And now, as I said, we just have got quite a few rehearsals under our belt, phenomenal rehearsals, and really gelled together in person as a rehearsing band in preparation for a couple of songs in March that happened right after the release of the album. So it's been a real blessing to have such talented people involved in this project.
This is a really powerful, like you said, it's got a lot of dark side to it, but it's also got a lot of meaning. I can tell by the lyrics that you use and the way that you guys have wrote it. What was it like to work with the producer, Jamie King, on this recording?
He is phenomenal. I mean, as a human being, he's just a wonderful person, but in studio, he really is a master of what he does. And part of the reason Davide and I chose him was I've been listening to a lot of Between the Buried and Me while I jog. Like, I get up at 5 in the morning and go for a run. And when we were thinking about producers, I realized, I know our music is nothing like Between the Buried and Me, but Jamie, listening to his production, is someone who can, bring a balance to a lot of different instruments, playing very technical things, and you can still hear every element of that musicality. And things going on in Gospel of the Witches musically, they're also very important. There had to be a really correct balance for everything to come through. And we thought, Jamie's got to be the guy. And he was just really phenomenal in studio. He's very intuitive. He really understands the music because he's also a musician. He was really great. Working with him as a vocalist, he really set the stage in the vocal booth to be probably the most pleasurable experience. I have to say that I think I spent more time worrying about recording my vocals than I did recording them. Everything went really quick. We were just really all on the same page. And he also did the mixing and mastering, and as you can hear there, he's just a pure artist. He's also coming from a technical standpoint where he really understands the frequencies, and he just blew us away. I mean, for me, this is a pinnacle moment in my musical career. This is a project that I had a bigger creative hand in, but the final result with what Jamie did just makes me really proud and honored because he took the music to a different level, and the qualities of the sound, the mixes, and the way he affected things, to me, just added so much more atmosphere and depth that I could ever imagine. It was another real blessing to work with someone who's just a master of his craft. And so we will be working with him with our next albums as well, hands down.
Right on. So I read that you painted this album cover. So how long have you been painting and been an artist?
Ever since I was younger, I did some of the artwork for Crisis when I was in that band, but I started painting again at the very beginning of 2006. And I hadn't really painted a lot until that point. I had done a few pieces here and there over the years. I didn't really have time. So in 2006, I began seriously painting again in oil paints, some acrylics. And I kind of delved deeply into that. I was living off my painting sales for a while. I was doing a lot of gallery shows. And then recently, a couple years ago when the music started, I kind of backed off of that a little bit just because I had to make time choices. But that was around the time period when Gospel of the Witches was forming, and I was having all these interesting experiences with this witch spirit that my painting kind of climbed to a new level technically. And I originally was not going to paint the album cover. I wanted to do something that was much more graphic design. And I tried a few things out, and they were okay, but Davide and Marco Barbieri at Century Media were big fans of my painting, and they were really encouraging me to paint, that I really needed to paint. And, I'm not really quite sure how the painting happened so quickly. I did not have a lot of time to paint it, but I had a strong idea, and, just went for it. I painted the back part of the album cover as well. So I guess it was meant to be very handcrafted.
So how would someone like me be able to get my hands on some of your beautiful artwork that I've been seeing lately since I found out that you did the painting on this album?
Oh, well, thank you so much for your compliment. I do have an Etsy store. It's been on a little hiatus lately, but if you let's see here, I think it's going to get you the proper address here. If you go to KarynCrisis.etsy.com, and Etsy is spelled ETSY, you'll be able to see a collection of art prints I have up there. They're not online right now. It'll probably be up in the next couple of days. But that's where I keep my little web shop. But if you just wanted to see paintings, you can just go to KarynCrisis.net. And I have paintings from the last handful of years up there, and you can just view them.
So, are there any plans for touring here in the United States and Europe?
Absolutely. We're working on that right now. We all can't wait to get that happening. Right now, the only thing on the calendar is March 28th in Clifton Park, New York, and March 29th at St. Vitus in Brooklyn, New York. Those are shows that happen right after the release of the album. But we are working with Century Media to get tours underway. We're all kind of raring to go and excited to make that happen. So you'll just have to also keep an eye on our Facebook page for all that updates, which is just facebook.com/Gospel of the Witches, all one word. And we're keeping a lot of information up there. Very soon in this coming week, we're going to be releasing a video, and probably another week or two after that, a video of everyone in our rehearsal space and interviews. So there's going to be a nice little personal peek into the band in the meanwhile. So keep your eye on the Facebook page.
I'm sure the fans are going to definitely enjoy that. I know I'd like to eventually get to do another interview with you and really dig into the history of witches and stuff. I'm a pagan myself and have been for many, many years.
Wonderful to hear that. That's great.
It's a great thing. It's a natural religion, and I love it.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, that's one of the things that hopefully we can talk about in the past, is that it is a natural religion, and part of the reason that there's still such a negative campaign around witches, men and women, who were all, men and women were killed too. It wasn't just women. Was it, the Roman Catholic Church and the Roman military decided to try to get rid of some of this power that this natural religion had to cure people and make a better life. So they had to, start a smear campaign that was backed up by torture as a way of persuasion to implement a synthetic religion that, has an appearance of being male-based. So something very strategic, and sadly, that stigma on that smear campaign, as you know, still sticks around these days. But we do what we can to make sure that the witches who, learned all their secrets through a natural means and who did a lot to make the quality of life better in the communities, we make sure they're not forgotten by maintaining that lifestyle in the modern age.
Well, talking about religion and stuff like that, isn't it kind of interesting how almost every religion that scares anybody, the base religion, all of them mention the most powerful parts of life, which is Mother Earth and Mother Nature. Mother is the giver of life.
Pardon?
Mother is the giver of life. Why would they be so scared of something so beautiful?
Yeah, that's the very interesting thing, is if you look back in ancient times, at the time of witchcraft, there were also, of course, the Celtic Druids. There were people who worshipped Isis. There were the Scandinavians and the Longobards who had their rituals too. And they were all around the same idea that you're talking about, that God, or the source energy we come from, of course, is bigger than we can all imagine, but we can connect to it through representations of both aspects of male and female energies in that, source energy. And it is all about a natural way of life, about being able to actually cure diseases with plants, about how to connect to the energies that are, and have your own direct connection through mediumship and your psychic senses to, agents of God, if you will, angels, spirit guides, gods and goddesses. And this used to be a very natural way for people to live, and it really did give them a better quality of life. Whereas people were going to church that was about this synthetic idea of God being a man and being a really angry kind of dude who might punish you. People were going to the church and dying. You know, they weren't being cured of their ailments. They weren't having any experience of this natural way of life. Whereas people and druids and witches and everyone else in these occult practices were actually having experiences. They weren't having to take someone's word for it, that this is the way things worked. They were experiencing this in their body and in their lives. And it's interesting that people would be afraid of that. But the way religions are, the big three religions are set up in the world in modern times, they were set up, of course, through torture and punishment and fear, and also by taking this idea of empowering someone on our own to be able to connect with a natural spirit in all things, and putting it in the hands of a priest or a preacher, and then waiting a whole lifetime maybe for one prayer to be answered. You know, there's so much fear and stigma placed on the natural way of connecting that people are still afraid to do that. At the same time, ironically, as you know, in churches, the leaders tell you, oh, pray to God and wait for your answer. Well, praying, any kind of prayer, is opening a conversation, which is a form of mediumship, because even their God isn't in a physical body. And so it's funny, they try to usurp these natural ways with the synthetic, form, at the same time scaring anybody from knowing too much about it, scaring everyone from trusting their own connection and their own intuitive abilities, which is part of the natural way of being a human. So it's very ironic that people would be scared of this natural, nurturing, healthy way of living, especially having to do with mother, a mother idea, Mother Earth and nurturing. It's very, very interesting.
So I know your time's very valuable right now with doing a lot of phone interviews and emailers. So my final question is, there's a lot more female vocalists coming out in the darker and heavier music in the last 15 years. What would you recommend for young female artists that are becoming into their age and joining bands to be able to do what you do vocally with the melodic vocals and yet be able to do the growls without blowing your vocal cords?
I don't know if I'm such a great person to give advice about that for. My vocal style is very natural. I was experimenting with industrial music before I entered a metal band, and I didn't know a lot about metal. And so my influences were like British pop, like Cocteau Twins and My Bloody Valentine, where there were really ethereal vocals. And then I was also drawn to this aspect of like the primal scream in bands like Einstürze and Neubauten, and some heavier, darker, more ritualistic sounding bands. So for me, it really was about healing myself through connecting to this female energy in myself, and also this male growling, cathartic kind of vocal, like releasing my primal scream. So for me, it was much more of an emotional journey. But some people have asked me vocal technique, how do I take care of my voice? And through the years, literally, until maybe a few years ago, I've just listened to what my voice told me to do. So it's a very intuitive thing for me. But someone did give me a CD of vocal exercises where you just kind of do the scales, making funny sounding sounds. And that's just exercise for your throat. So if you are going to try to do something like take your voice to a limit by growling and it doesn't feel so natural to you, there is a benefit to learning like a natural technique like that to sort of keep your muscles working and not being overworked by that feeling of sandpaper that sometimes people have. But I would mostly advise to people just like follow your heart and your emotions. If there is emotion going into what you're singing, your technique is going to follow. It will naturally work out for you. I'm a singer who didn't, unless I got the flu and I was coughing really bad for a few days with phlegm coming up, I would never lose my voice. And it's because, I had a lot of natural emotion go into my technique, and my technique followed. So that's what I would say, really, is to follow your own unique way, to follow your own heartbeat, let your emotions guide you, and your technique will find its way around that. You don't just need to growl and be melodic because everyone else is. If that is your style and you're working towards it, but you're having trouble developing, then I would look into something like, do-it-yourself vocal scale program. You could probably find buying a CD today or a digital thing. And by doing those scales, you just give your voice a lot more exercise. It's like pumping iron for your throat. And watch your diet. Try not to eat a lot of sugars or dairy, which make a lot of phlegm in your throat and can lead to sinus infections. just having a healthy lifestyle and really listening to what your voice is telling you. It's the best advice I could give.
Well, once again, Karyn, thank you for your time. I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys come to Seattle so I can possibly do a video interview with you and also just to do photos and watch you live again. Thank you for everything that you do musically, and thanks for your time for this interview.
Oh, Dave, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I really appreciate your support, and I do. I look forward to meeting you in Seattle so we can meet in person and keep talking. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and good luck with your album and your tours, and I hope to see you soon.
Awesome. Take care, Dave.
Take care, Karyn.
Bye.
Bye.